Pleasant day. Welcome to a special edition of Talking Point. We are in with the Dominica Social Security, the DSS, as the DSS continues to bring you important information that you need to know. Among the topics for discussion today is Social Security coverage for the self-employed and voluntary contributors. So self-employed persons, if you are your own boss, you want to listen attentively, you want to refer the program to someone else, send the link. We're live on the social media as well. We want to say welcome to our viewers on social media and to those listening via the FM frequencies and on dbcradio.net, also across the various streaming apps. Welcome. My name is Miguel Labadie. And we have with us in the studios Mr. Augustus Etienne and Miss or Mrs. Kamasha Lloyd. Let's get that correct. Gentlemen, lady, good morning. Welcome.
Good morning, Miguel, and good morning to your listeners.
Yes, how are you doing, Mr. Etienne?
It could be worse. I thanking God for his blessings and favors.
Yes, you're giving thanks. I understand you had a smooth ride coming into the capital today.
Well, it wasn't so smooth, but I was ahead of you, so I guess I did it before you.
All right, fantastic. Hope everyone is safe. And Kamasha Lloyd, you have to advise, Miss or Mrs.?
It's Mrs. Miguel.
Mrs., okay. Let me
Okay, and good morning to you, Miguel, and to your listeners of DBS Radio. We are happy to be here again. We were supposed to be here last week, but due to certain things, we could not be here. But we are happy to be here again this month to educate your listeners about the Social Security program. Very well, as you've been doing for quite some time now. You continue to do so, and we applaud your efforts at the Dominica Social Security. It is the 27th of March, a few days away from this deadline. There's been this announcement around for submitting the COL, or Certificate of Life forms. Can you touch on that a little bit? Okay, Miguel, yes. So Certificate of Life forms are due on the 31st of March 2025. So we are encouraging all Social Security pensioners, if they have not already done so, they have until the 31st of March to ensure that their pensions are not suspended, because after the 31st of March, we will be suspending pensions to persons who have not yet submitted their Certificate of Life forms. And that is a requirement for all Social Security pensioners. Every year, they need to just indicate that they are still alive and eligible to continue receiving their benefits. For persons who are out of state, Miguel, we encourage them to call our WhatsApp number by video call. The number is 275-2600, so 767-275-2600 is the number to call to renew your Certificate of Life form. You need to ensure that you have with you a valid form of ID when you are calling. Actually, before you call, you need to have your valid ID on hand so that we can verify that indeed you are the person who is calling to verify your Certificate of Life. Also, for persons who are in Dominica and who may not be able to get their Certificate of Life forms done because probably they are homebound, they are unable to move or so forth, they can also use the opportunity to call the WhatsApp number to renew their Certificate of Life forms. Other persons can either collect their forms at the office, or they can go to the credit unions in our districts where they are receiving their benefits and get that form to recertify that they are alive. So you have until the 31st of March to ensure that everything is in order. Thereafter, your payments are suspended, and then when we receive notification that you are alive, we will reinstate the benefits.
All right, so essentially it's a document to show that I'm alive, I'm living, I'm existing, I'm here.
Yes, that's right.
All right, very well. Let's take a few words from our sponsor for our toll-free line and from the Dominica Social Security, and then we get back into our discussion.
Register with Social Security. Make sure your employers pay, cause some of them do melee. Make sure they pay your Social Security. Secure your age pension when you're old. Invalidity pension when health has left you cold. Survivor's pension, secure for your spouse and your children. Life and health, above unpredictable. Don't take risk, you can't afford to gamble. Secure yourself with social security. I said that. Social security, it good, you know.
Too often, customers are counted but not valued, like mere numbers, statistics, transactions. But at Flow, we're prioritizing you, our valued customers who have been with us through every milestone, every moment. That's why we're putting our money where your loyalty is. Flow customers claim up to $400 in rewards for smartphones, groceries, and more when you add mobile to your current internet plan. Because loyalty isn't a one-way street. At Flow, loyalty flows both ways.
And welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. We're here with Mrs. Commercial Lloyd and Mr. Augustus Etienne of the Dominica Social Security. So, no amount of education is too much, and I know you've been talking about that for some time. We are just continuing with the exercise. The focus primarily today, the self-employed and voluntary contributors or contributions. Let's have our listeners, and as a friend of mine would say, the barefoot man, understand a self-employed person. How do you as the DSS classify, or who do you categorize as a self-employed person? It may not be as straightforward for the common man. So let's hear from you guys on that. Yeah.
Okay, so as the term suggests, a self-employed person is a person who employs himself or herself. Whether you are a doctor, an accountant, a bus driver, a farmer, a fisherman, a seamstress, the gamut of occupations that people can engage in from which they earn their livelihoods, where they are deemed to be their own bosses. They determine what they do, when they do it, how long they do it for. And there is a test that you do to ascertain who is a self-employed person. You look at ownership of the tools, and so that the person uses to carry out the work. You look at the person who stands to benefit if things go well, or who stands to lose if things do not go so well. Who determines the terms and conditions of work, what time you come, what you do, and all of those things. So sometimes there is it's a gray area, but generally we use that free prong test to determine who a self-employed person is. So if you're working for pay and you are not answerable, accountable to another person, you are deemed to be self-employed, and you are required by law to register with and pay contributions to the Social Security for your own social protection. Whereas we have employees who work for other people, and the law holds the employer as an agent of Social Security for the purposes of deducting and paying contributions on behalf of the workers. The self-employed person has to take that responsibility to provide coverage for himself, herself. And by virtue of the contributions that they will pay, their benefits, their beneficiaries, their loved ones also stand to benefit should something happen to them prematurely.
Okay. Have you determined, because you said by law a self-employed person is required to make their contributions again for their own protection and benefits in the long run, or even in the short-term situations. But the self-employed people in Dominica really adhering to that based on the data, the information? To what extent are self-employed persons making these contributions?
Not to a great extent. The program has been in place since 1989, January 1989. So by this time, really and truly, there should be no person in Dominica who is attaining pensionable age in Dominica who had been engaged in work for pay to reach pensionable age of 65 and not have access to a pension from Social Security. So in the beginning, a lot of people express interest, they register, they start paying, and they abandon ship along the way, and they've not come back to pay. It is mandatory in law, as I said. Once you are working for pay in the country, you are supposed to register, and not just register and leave it there, but to pay the contributions. Because whereas the registration is the key to accessing coverage, registration is not sufficient for you to access benefits. You have to pay contributions. It is the payment of contributions that confer rights to benefits, not registration. So you have thousands of persons who have registered at some point in time. Some of them start paying, some of them abandon ship, some of them are paying consistently, others start, they stop, they come back, and sometimes their situations can change where they can get a job. And when they're working for somebody, that person is responsible for paying for them. But when they're working for themselves, they should pay for themselves. So although it's mandatory in law, we as administrators have not actually pursued anybody in court to force them to do what they need to do. We administer it as if it were voluntary, because we believe that if the person failed to do what they're supposed to do, it is to their detriment. Because they have to have a discipline, first of all, and be prepared to make the necessary sacrifice to put that little money aside every so often, so that when they cannot work and earn, they have access to a benefit. So to the extent that they fail so to do, they will be the ones who will be without an income later on. But we are thinking that the time is coming when maybe we'll have to start pursuing making an example of some self-employed persons. Because if we fail to do that, we're going to make them a burden on the state later on, because they have an opportunity to participate now, and if they fail to, later on the state have to provide for them, whereas they could have provided for themselves by making a small contributions even on a consistent and regular basis to access a benefit later on.
Yeah, one may be a self-employed or have their own business, be it a farmer, bus driver, whatever it is, and may still be employed for a larger company. Say Miguel is employed at DBS, but Miguel is a farmer doing his thing, earning substantial income. I know the contributions are based on percentage of the earnings.
Yeah.
So in that case, what do you advise? What should this individual do?
Okay, at the moment, you see, everything with our Social Security is stipulated in law. So at the moment, a person cannot pay in two capacities, as self-employed as an employee at the same time, because the employee status takes precedence over that of the self-employed person. But the situation that you just described is making it necessary for us to be able to allow them to do both, because probably you're working at DBS part-time and you're farming or you're freelancing, journalism, whatever you're doing, you might be making a higher income there. So what we're seeking to do, and we've been seeking to do this for several years now, the amended legislation have been drafted by our in-house attorney. We're just waiting for the authorities to pass the necessary legislation for us to be able to do that. So to allow you to contribute both as an employer and as a self-employed person, subject to the maximum earnings that we cover, which is $7,000 a month. Because for some persons, the income they receive from the so-called regular employment is much lower than what they make from the self-employed activity. And so if you allow them to contribute on both statuses, they will be contributing on their total income, and their benefit at the end of it, they will closer approximate the earnings that they were living on when they were working and earning. But we have not gotten the necessary amended legislation to be able to make that possible. Now, on the other hand, an employee can have multiple employers, and each employer is required to pay for that employee, and so the employee's earnings will be increased as a result of the fact that you're working for more than one person as opposed to just one person. But the person who is working for somebody and doing self-employed activity at the same time cannot at the moment contribute on their self-employed income. Okay,
cannot in terms of not even voluntarily.
The law doesn't permit it. The law doesn't permit it. So if you consider in both cases, the employee one is what is going to take precedence, and that is becoming a challenge for some people.
Okay. What is the rate? How does that differ? The rate for a self-employed person than the regular employee? Is it the same, higher, lower?
Actually, Miguel, for now, the rate for the employee right now is 6.75% from their earnings. So the employer will deduct 6.75% from the employee's pay. That's the employee contribution on behalf of their own self, and the employer matches that with 7.75% of the employee's earnings. And At the two, a total of 14.50% is contributed to DSS on behalf of employees every month. For the self-employed person, they have no employer to match any portion of their earnings as contribution. So the self-employed person is responsible for the total contribution on their earnings. And currently the rate for self-employed persons is 13.50% of their earnings. So the self-employed person basically would come to DSS, for example, somebody who is now coming on board as a self-employed person. They would come to the office, they would meet with an officer, they would tell us what their earnings are, when things are good, when things are not so good, how much do they earn, because with self-employed persons, their earnings are never fixed. It depends on circumstances. Sometimes they make more money than other times. And we would look at their earnings from the previous year, total earnings, and provide an assessment of the 13.50%. The contributions that the self-employed persons pay are due on a quarterly basis. So based on that total 13.50%, we would give them a quarterly rate that they would have to pay to Social Security every quarter as their contribution. However, some self-employed persons may prefer to pay their contributions monthly, and so they can also do that. But generally, it's due quarterly. So, for example, the quarter from January, February, March, it's due by the 14th of April, 2025.
Okay, but you were saying?
And I also wanted to add that some persons may be wondering why the differences in the rates. For the self-employed persons, they only qualify for sickness, maternity, and all our long-term benefits. That's age, invalidity, survivors, and the funeral grants. However, employees qualify for all or have access to all of the benefits that Social Security offers. And so that is one of the reasons why the rates are different. Also because the employees have the employer to match a portion, because really and truly the employee helped the employer to earn, to make money, and so the employers too pay a portion of their contribution on behalf of those employees. Right. But with the self-employed, you work for yourself, you earn for yourself. When you cannot work, you cannot earn money. And so it is important for self-employed persons to see the importance of Social Security, that when they cannot make money or when they are ill and cannot work, they are losing money. Whereas Social Security is there to provide income replacement for them, so that in the event of illness, a portion of their income can be replaced as benefits.
Although technically the self-employed person may say, hey, I'm paying more, higher rate, on even if, at the end of the day, you have a business still, so you can look at it, I think we have someone on the line. Let's go to the phone. Hello, good morning. Thanks for holding.
Yes, good morning, Miguel, and good morning to your Social Security people, I guess, right?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, caller.
Okay. Good morning. I have two questions. Let me break down my questions. Regarding Social Security payments, who benefits at the end of the day, the employee or the employer?
The contributions are being paid on behalf of the employee.
I asked the question. I asked, who benefits?
The employees are the ones who will benefit because the contributions are being paid for them.
Nice. Okay.
On their behalf.
So now, why is it that the employer pays a bigger contribution than the employee, and not, why should it be the other way around?
Okay.
In other words,
go ahead.
In other words, the employee pays 6.75 and the employer pays 7.75. Correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Right. So why is it that the employer pays more when it is the employee who benefits at the end of the day?
Okay, there is a
thank you, caller.
Thank you for that question. There is one particular benefit that the employees have access to that the employer only contributes towards, and that is called employment injury benefits, where the employee would sustain an accidental injury on the job or contract a disease at work. And that is a responsibility of the employer. So in a sense, it kind of replaces what used to be referred to as workman's compensation that the employer would be required to provide protection to their workers against. So initially, the employer actually was paying probably almost double what the employee was paying, but right now it is almost on par, except that the employer pays an extra 0.75 or 1% for that employment injury-related benefit that the employer is probably paying to provide the employee protection against accidental injury on the job. So that particular one is why That is the reason why the employer's rate is now about 1% higher than the employee's rate. Because for that particular benefit, employment injury, it is the employer only who contributes towards those benefits.
I'm sure that has been a concern across for
no,
some
but
time
but
now.
when we began doing reforms, you know that our contribution rate has been increasing by 0.25% since 2012. For the first 8 years of those increases, the employees alone bore that increase to bring their contribution rate almost on par with that of the employer. And when it was that close, we alternate now between the employer and employee, so that every other year they bear the 0.25% increase, so that the employee is actually paying almost the same amount as the employer, but for the fact that the employer alone contributes towards the employment injury benefits.
Now, coming back to this, the rate for the self-employed, you're asking the self-employed persons to pay 13.5% from their personal earnings, not their business earnings, right? Because say again, I run a bus, I make $1,000, and I pay myself $500. You're asking me to pay 13.5% of that $500. And we've thought that through for the years now and felt that that is okay financially, economically. That is something that the self-employed people should be able to handle.
Of course. And the fact that they are the ones who declare to us what their earnings are, they pretty much determine the amount of contributions they have to pay, as well as the amount of benefit that they will have access to. Because what we need to appreciate is that the earnings on which we pay contributions are the very same earnings on which we receive benefits. Because everything we do is a percentage of an earning.
Right.
Now, earnings may vary from one person to another, but if you're an employee, you have deducted from your salary 6.75% of whatever your earnings are. One person is $1,000, one person is $5,000, another person is $7,000. Everybody is contributing 6.75% of what they are making. By the same token, when they qualify for benefit, they will receive, in the case of sickness, 60% of whatever they are making, whatever their earnings are. So in terms of the dollar value of what comes in as contributions or what you get as benefit will differ based on your level of your earnings. But the rate, the percentage of your earnings you pay as contributions or that you receive as benefit is the same across the board for all for the same category of contributors. So all self-employed persons who are paying now will be paying 13.5% of their declared earnings. They will get 60% of their declared earnings as their benefit when they fall sick. When they qualify for pension later on, they'll get between 30 and 60% of their declared earnings, the average earnings over the particular period that we take account of to process their pensions.
Now, Mrs. Lloyd, you mentioned earlier, I don't know if I got it wrong, that the self-employed people are not entitled to as much benefits as the regular employee?
Yes, so just a while ago, Mr. Etienne mentioned about employment injury benefits, which the employer contributes 1% on behalf of their employees. So since the self-employed persons do not have an employer to contribute, then that 1% obviously is not being paid towards employment injury. And also to further note that with employment injury, well, I should probably add that employment injury would be a benefit that an insured person would have access to for an injury that is sustained on the job, or an illness that they contract on the job that is employment related. And to add to that, for that particular benefits, there are various qualifying conditions that you need to meet. So there should be a witness, somebody who is there to have seen the injury occur, or somebody that you would go to say, hey, this happened to me. I'm working at DBS Radio and probably I slipped and fell and broke my leg or something at work. With the self-employed person, because they work for their own self, it is very difficult for them to be able to meet those qualifying conditions. And so for that reason, they do not have access to that benefits. Further, because Social Security, because that benefits opens up so many other benefits that you can qualify for without having paid any contributions, because once you are registered with Social Security, you have access to employment injury benefit as an employee. Okay, so because it opens you up to some other benefits such as medical expenses, disablement, and death benefits, and so on, we have to monitor that benefit very closely. And there are conditions that we need to be met that the self-employed person is unable to provide at this time. And so because it makes monitoring very difficult, we have to monitor it so very closely because of the nature of that benefit and the other benefits that you have access to even without paying any contributions. For this reason, self-employed persons do not have access to employment injury. But if the self-employed person gets injured during work, they will have access to sickness benefits, which will replace up to 60% of their earnings for the period that they are unable to earn income.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a few words. We'll be back with our folks from the Dominica Social Security.
Too often, customers are counted but not valued, like mere numbers, statistics, transactions. But at Flow, we're prioritizing you, our valued customers who have been with us through every milestone, every moment. That's why we're putting our money where your loyalty is. Flow customers claim up to $400 in rewards for smartphones, groceries, and more when you add mobile to your current internet plan. Because loyalty isn't a one-way street. At Flow, loyalty flows both ways.
Secure yourself, secure your family. Register with Social Security. Make sure your employers pay, cause some of them do melee. Make sure they pay your Social Security. Secure your age pension when you're old. Invalidity pension when health has left you cold. Survivor's pension, secure for your spouse and your children. Life and health are both unpredictable. Don't take risks, you can't afford to gamble. Secure yourself with Social Security. I said that. Social Security, it good, you know.
We're on Talking Points with the Dominica Social Security. Mrs. Commercial Lloyd and Mr. Augustus Etienne are our guests this morning. Feel free to call us toll free 1-800-327 161-327 448-3284. Mr. Etienne, Mrs. Lloyd, what are some of the other concerns in respect to self-employed contributions that you've heard over the years? What are people asking? What are people saying? What are you looking at? Before you answer that question, let's go to the line. Good morning, caller. Hello, good morning, you're live. Okay, not quite there. Yes.
Okay, to say that when the program started in 1989, the program was only offering access to self-employed people to long-term pension benefits, age invalidity survivors, and funeral. And some people were thinking that that wasn't adequate for them. And as I mentioned in that, I want to say that the Social Security program is not static by no means. The Social Security program is very dynamic. Changes are made as we progress, as situations change, because the provisions that are in place at any given point in time are supposed to reflect the realities on the ground. So we started in 1989 and we offered self-employed persons coverage for long-term benefits only, and they were complaining. So from 2009, about 10 years later, 2009, we offered short-term benefits, sickness and maternity. And I need to say to that, all the benefits that we offer has a cost associated to it. So the differences in the contribution rate between the employee and the employer, an employee total contribution paid on behalf of the employee. The employee is contributing to all of the benefits, short-term, employment injury, long-term. Self-employed persons initially were contributing just towards long-term, and when we added short-term benefits, their rate increased as well.
Yes, we have someone on the line. Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning, Miguel.
Good morning, welcome.
How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, I want to ask a question. Someone who's almost someone who's 59 and getting 60 in some months to come. Can they come to the office to fill a form?
Yeah. Can you repeat that question, please?
Someone who's almost getting 60 in some months to come. Can they come to the office to fill a form so that they could get the Social Security?
Okay. So the Social Security, the pensionable age for Social Security has been established at 65 since 2021. So that a person becomes pensionable at 65, it means the person can continue to work, be employable, work, and be coverable, be insured under Social Security until they attain the age of 65. There is a provision in place for now that says you can apply for the benefit anywhere between 60 and 65. So if you are still working, you are still exposed to risk, you probably should continue to pay contributions and wait to collect your pension later. It doesn't necessarily have to be at the age of 65, anytime between 60 and 65. But it doesn't mean that as you turn 60, you can come and apply. If that is a choice you want to make, you have to come and we have to explain to you the implications of making that choice before you actually are able to access the benefit. So if you come and you complete an application for age benefit form, for example, and I want to say, as I say age, you're not paying a retirement benefit that you access whenever you retire. You receive an age benefit when you attain an age. The law says you become pensionable at an age, and it's upon that attainment of that age that you become entitled to your full pension. If you take it before that, you're going to receive a modified or reduced pension, because it means by the time you die, you will have received that pension, you will have enjoyed that pension that much longer than if you had taken it at the full age. So it is okay for you to come and complete a form at 60, but the completion of that form will not automatically trigger the commencement of payment to you, because you're not entitled to it until 65. If you want to take it before 65, you have to go through a process where we can show you the figures that your pension work out at and what you'll be receiving depending on when you apply for it. And then you will be making an informed decision. Then you have to complete a special form that is not easily accessible. It is only after we explain to you and you decide you want to proceed with taking it early that we'll provide you with that order form, and it is on the completion of that order form that the payment would commence based on when you tell us you want us to start paying you.
By the way, how do terms differ, terms and conditions for the self-employed, attaining that pensionable age?
Everything is the same for everybody. We are not differentiating between the rules apply for employees, self-employed persons, voluntary contributors. Self-employed persons can have access to sickness once they're paying their contributions. They meet the qualifying condition while they are sick for as long as they are sick. Voluntary contributors will access their pensions once they meet the qualifying condition at the material time. Employees will be able to access their benefit once they meet the qualifying condition at the material time. The conditions do not vary based on whether you are employed, self-employed, or voluntary.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
the same conditions would apply.
All right.
A self-employed person wants to take it early, the same thing applies.
All right then.
Yeah.
Voluntary contributors. Some people are overseas. Some people just want to make a contribution. Let's speak to that a bit.
Okay. To say that voluntary coverage has always been part of Social Security, but initially, for you to be able to sign up as a voluntary contributor, you would have had to have been employed and contributing to Social Security for at least 2 years before you would have migrated, and it was only or mostly available to persons who migrated. But with effect from 2014, the laws were amended to make it possible for anybody, anywhere, at any time to sign up for voluntary coverage, whether or not you were registered and paying before you would have gone away.
Just hold that thought, Mr. Etienne, before you continue.
Yeah.
2 years consistently.
104 credits, which would represent 2 years contributions cumulatively. It doesn't necessarily have to mean two straight years.
All right.
That by the time you left Dominica, you would have had to have paid in a minimum of 104 credits contributions for you to have been able to sign up as voluntary. In 2014, that was done away with. You can sign up from scratch. You went away to study before you started working. You never worked in Dominica. You never were registered, and you stayed back overseas working. And you want to participate in the program because you intend to come back at retirement, and you want to have access to a benefit when you come back, or you probably want to make a contribution to the welfare of your country while you're on the other side working. You can sign up to pay voluntarily. And as the word says, voluntary, it means you're not mandated to by law, because you are neither an employee nor a self-employed person, who are two sets of persons who must register and pay by law. voluntary suggests it's on a voluntary basis, so it's not compulsory, but it's forcing you. But you have the desire to get that protection as well as you have the means, the resources with which to pay the contributions, and so you can choose to sign up for voluntary coverage. But you only get in coverage to the long-term, the pension benefits down the road at 60, 65, or if you become too sick to work before 60, and when you die, your dependents will get benefit, and we assist in burying you. So those contributions from the voluntary contributors are towards the long-term benefits, not short-term, because if you live in overseas and you fall sick, we don't know what you're doing, we can't monitor what you're doing, we can't pay you sickness benefit, but long-term benefits, at the end of your working life, if you pay the number of contributions required, you will be able to get a pension for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm. I was trying to decipher a message here. I'm not quite sure if I understood, but I got a WhatsApp message which reads, I find that unfair to the elderly pensioners. They can simply get an annual death review from the registry and update their system. I'm not quite sure if I follow exactly in what context. Probably something you mentioned earlier.
I guess it has to do with the life certificate, the certificate of life form.
Okay.
This system is established to pay benefits to eligible persons when they become entitled to their benefits. But the system should not be paying benefits to a dead person. Right. So that is why they just need to get documentary evidence at a given point in time on an annual basis that on that day at that time the person was alive, and so we can continue to pay them. Now, if we do not hear from the person, we do not know. We presume the person to be dead. Because a dead person doesn't have a need, and you don't want to be paying pensions to a dead person that somebody else is using. If that happens, the person who uses the money beyond the death of the person have to pay it back to the system. The system exists to pay benefits, but it mustn't pay benefits that are not due. So if you pay benefits to a dead person after because you didn't realize the person had died and somebody has access to the account and they use the money, that person has to pay the money back. Even though you have to take them to court to recover the money. So the requirement is simply for them on a particular day. And sometimes they say, but look, you're talking to me. Now that we have the WhatsApp video call option, talking to, and we can use that to certify. But we need documentary evidence. So although we do it using the video call, we still put in the information on a document that we say on Thursday the 27th of March 2025 at 10:15 a.m. I spoke to Miguel Labade on video call WhatsApp live, and I can vouch at that moment he was alive. An hour later Miguel can die, but at that time when he spoke to him he was alive. I personally have had the experience. I do a form for somebody on Sunday and the person was dead by Tuesday. Before the form could be processed at the office, the person had died. Wow. But at that moment, on the Sunday, the person was alive, and I certified that the person was alive at that time. But the person died 2 days later. Now, if we did not find out the person had died 2 days later for whatever reason, we could very well have paid that person for the next year. Because by the next year, same time, we would be required the person to certify that they're still alive. But because I was aware, the office, as soon as they had to stop the benefit, because you don't want to be paying a dead person benefit. It doesn't mean the benefit stops upon it. The benefit to the person stops upon their death. But if they leave dependents behind, the benefit has to go to their dependents, and the dependents qualify from the date of death. So there's not going to be necessarily a gap, a break in the amount of money that will come to the family. Because when the person was alive, they're getting their pension. They die, the benefit will be payable to them up to the day prior to their death, and the dependents would qualify for the benefit from the date of death going forward.
But at least the dependents can qualify.
Can qualify. If they are dependents, they can qualify. If there are no dependents, then the benefit stops off with the death of the person, and we would just pay the funeral grant towards the burial expenses of the person who has died. Yeah.
Anything else, Mrs. Lloyd, you would probably want to share with us?
And just to add to Miguel, for the certificate of life form, when we suspend those benefits, that doesn't mean that your benefit is just cancelled or lost. What will happen is that when you submit that documentary evidence that you are alive, from whatever dates you submit it, we will go back and reinstate the benefit from when it was stopped. So basically, that is just documentary evidence to just recertify to us, yes, I am alive on that date, and so I'm eligible to continue receiving my benefits. In the absence of that, as Mr. Etienne said, we presume you are dead, and when we receive that notification that, yes, you are indeed alive, we'll reinstate the benefit from the time that we had suspended it.
We have situations where those benefits remain suspended for years. So we presume that when you didn't do it in 2022, you might have been dead, But in 2025, you do one. You certify that you're alive in 2025. It means you've been alive from 2022. It's just that we didn't know to get the information in time. So you're still entitled to your benefit, and so we go back and pay you from the time we stopped in 2022 to bring you up to current.
And I have had a few persons, Miguel, that I have certified that they are alive in 2025, and those persons have not submitted their forms for a few years. And so because we get that notification, now we can go back and reinstate the benefit and pay them from the time that it was stopped to current and continue paying.
Okay, so it's not a case where all
benefit
would
is
be
lost.
lost, yeah?
No.
So that's
It's
good.
just suspended.
Because the age benefit, the only thing that can cause your benefit to stop is your death. Once you qualify for it at the material time, because you've made the necessary number of contributions, you are entitled to receive that benefit until you die.
All right, let's take a few messages and then back with the discussion.
Secure yourself, secure your family. Register with Social Security. Make sure your employers pay, cause some of them do melee. Make sure they pay your Social Security. Secure your age pension when you're old. Invalidity pension when health has left you cold. Survivor's pension secure for your spouse and your children. Life and health above unpredictable. Don't take risk. You can't afford to gamble. Secure yourself with Social Security. I said that. Social Security. It good, you know.
Make sure your employers pay because some of them do melee. What happens when deductions are being made and employee finds out that these have not been submitted for some time now to the Dominica Social Security? Employer have been in default. What happens?
We have recourse to the courts to recover the money. So we encourage people to check from time to time to ensure that the contributions being deducted from their pay are in fact being paid to Social Security. Do not take it for granted that the fact that you see a deduction in your payslip every month, that the money is actually being paid into Social Security. There are in fact some employers who make the deduction and for various reasons do not pay it to Social Security. So if you come and you make the inquiry and we find that out, we have field officers who would go out there, try to get the information, try to get the commitment from the employers to pay. And if time passes and they have not made good on the payments, we have recourse to the courts. A slow process albeit, but we have recourse to the courts to recover those monies to ensure that the employees will be able to have access to their benefits when they need to.
And would you have had any situations where an employee would have had challenges, probably benefiting from some claim because of that kind of situation?
The non-payment of contributions by the employer can affect the employee's entitlement to benefit. Because in the short term, while the employee is at work, if the employee takes ill and cannot work for a while and the employer has not been paying their contributions, they will not be able to get sickness benefit when they fall sick. In the long term, if the employers along the way have not made the contributions, they may fall short of qualifying for the age benefit, or even if they qualify, the amount that they will receive as their pension will probably be less than what it rightfully would have been had all the employers paid all their contributions along the way. So the payment of the contributions or the non-payment of the contribution can affect a person's entitlement as well as the quantum of benefit that they could otherwise enjoy.
I'm not sure if you outlined all the terms regarding the voluntary contributor package, Mr. Etienne. I know you started earlier.
So I was saying that the voluntary coverage existed from the inception of Social Security, but from 2014, it has been rendered a lot easier that a person can apply for registration as voluntary contributor without having been previously registered and contributing to the system. The rate of contribution that they pay at the moment is 12.15%, less than the self-employed, because whereas self-employed have access to short-term benefits, sickness and maternity, voluntary contributors do not have access to it. They only contribute towards the pension benefit, age at 65, invalidity before 60, survivors upon death, funeral grant upon death.
And also to add to Miguel, for the voluntary contributor coverage, that is particularly beneficial to Dominicans residing out of Dominica. So probably you were residing in Dominica, contributing to Social Security as an employee, and you migrated, but you don't want your contributions to just stop here. You want to continue to enhance the benefit that you will get later down in life, probably when you come to qualify for your age benefits. You should continue to make those contributions to Social Security. Also, we have Dominicans who may have migrated to countries where they cannot contribute to the Social Security program in those countries. And a typical example would be probably persons who leave and migrate to the US, maybe on a visa, a tourist visa, and they overstay their status. And so they do not have legal status in the US to work, and so they cannot contribute to the US Social Security system. These persons can, in fact, register with DSS and contribute as voluntary contributors to ensure that when they can no longer work in life, probably they're at the age of the pensionable age, they can have access to those long-term benefits that we offer. And if something happens to them, they leave behind their dependents can qualify for receipt of a benefit. So, and also if you're in a country where we do not have a reciprocal agreement, because we have reciprocal agreements with the CARICOM countries, for example. So if you're in one of those countries, probably like St. Martin, for example, then you can actually come contribute as a voluntary contributor with DSS to ensure that later on you can have access to a pension.
Yeah, very good point that Mrs. Lloyd just made is you have to be in a country with which we do not have reciprocity for you to be able to pay voluntary contributions. Because if you work in a country where we have reciprocity, the contributions cannot be duplicated because we take account of your contributions in those other countries. So throughout CARICOM, we have a CARICOM agreement in place, whether you work in Dominica, Barbados, St. Lucia, Antigua, wherever. You contribute where you are working, and at the end of your working life, you benefit from your total participation in this space in CARICOM.
How is that going so far, the voluntary contributions from people overseas?
Since we changed the
requirements
in 2014, we've seen an increase in the number of persons. A lot of persons, when they visit, they inquire. Some of them would have had some contributions in the system, not enough to qualify for a pension by the time they left Dominica, and so they have an opportunity to enhance that so that when they turn 65, they can get a pension down the road. So we've seen an increase since we modified the provisions, the requirements in 2014. I can't tell you what the exact number is now, but I'm sure we have a few hundreds now. Before it used to be just maybe about 20 something, but I'm sure we have in excess of a few hundreds of persons now.
And to say that persons don't necessarily have to visit Social Security physically or be in Dominica for them to apply for voluntary status. If you're out of state, you're listening probably to the program and you're interested, you can initiate that application from right where you are. You can just send us an email. Our email address is dss@dss.dm or contact@dss.dm, or you can call the office for more information if you feel so. And the forms are also available on our website. The website is www.dss.dm. So we have all of our forms available on the website. Application for voluntary contributor status, application for self-employed as well. And the person just needs to complete the form, send in their information, and from there we initiate all the discussion that we need to have with them in order to let them know how much they're supposed to contribute. And the payments can also be made by bank transfer, Miguel. Yeah. So persons don't need to visit DSS physically in person to make their payments as voluntary contributors.
Yeah, that's good, facilitating with the digital process. I see you also have a Facebook page.
Yes, we do, Miguel. And so our Facebook page, Dominica Social Security, we regularly update information regarding to what we are doing or what is taking place at DSS. And so we encourage persons, if you just want to keep abreast of all the information about Social Security, about the program, how you stand to benefit from the program, or if you need any clarifications, you can regularly visit our page where we post information about the program. And Miguel, we are also available to meet with stakeholders, to have sessions. If persons want to invite us to meet with their employees or their groups, their members, the organizations, they just need to extend the invitation and we will be happy to meet and to provide clarification and information to persons.
Very well, we can appreciate that. And as we come to the end of the program, what other information we probably wanted to highlight for our listeners and contributors out there?
So we have a situation where we have a growing and expanding what we call informal sector, where a lot more persons are going into self-employment, and they need to appreciate the need for them to participate in the program. Yes, it requires a level of discipline. Excuse a level of discipline on their part to come in and make the payments. But they need to think of the possibility of them, something happening to them, and them not being able to continue to ply their trade and earning income. And especially where they have people who depend on them. So that if they're not doing it just for themselves, they can do it for the benefit of their loved ones. Yes, it is primarily for them while they are here, but if something were to happen to them, God forbid, they can know the young children they live in behind can be taken care of by the payment of the contributions. Now, for persons who might be operating businesses, if you're operating a business under a business name, you would have to be registered as a self-employed person for you to pay for yourself. But if instead of registering a business name, you were to set up what you call a company or a corporation, where the corporation, the company is a separate person from you, the owner. The company can be paying for you as an employee. So it would not have the burden of you having to remember and you having to make the effort to pay. The company could deduct and pay on your behalf as they would for the other employees. A lot of self-employed persons, excuse me, who operate businesses, they pay the contribution on behalf of the employees because the law requires that they do that, but they fail to pay for themselves. But they need to recognize that they too need the protection. And so do it, make the sacrifice, probably forego having a drink on the weekend, pay the money in, so that when that time comes down the road, you can have access to a benefit as a matter of right, not a matter of somebody feeling, well, let me give Miguel a little something to help him tie him over to the next month. You would be able to maintain your independence and your dignity because you will have participated in the program and you will have earned your benefit as a matter of right.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, and to add to Miguel, that having a social security card alone is not enough, because what you find, a lot of persons, they register with social security, they have a social security card probably flashing about, and they do not have access to benefits because they never contributed to the program. They may have contributed once or twice, then stopped and never contributed again. So just having a social security card, registering with social security is not enough. You need to ensure that you make those contributions to DSS so that you can have access to those benefits that we offer. And to reiterate again, Miguel, our social security card is not an ID card. It is a card that we give to persons who register and contribute to the program to identify them as insured persons and as contributors to Social Security. So we find that a lot of persons are coming to the DSS to request an ID card, or they need a Social Security card because they need to go to the bank to do a transaction, or they need to go to Western Union or MoneyGram. And to let them know that for you to have access to a Social Security card, you have to be a contributing member of Social Security. We have also been informed that the banks are requesting persons that they need to have a Social Security card to do business with the bank. And so everybody will not have a Social Security card, Miguel, because everybody is not a contributor to Social Security. We don't give cards upon birth at Social Security like in some jurisdictions. And so once you are a registered contributor to Social Security, you will have a card, but you need to continue to ensure that you pay those contributions to the SS so that you can have access to the benefits that we offer to our insured persons.
And these cards are not indefinite, right? One has to come to renew the cards after a certain period.
Yeah, it became necessary for us to do this because persons are able to use the Social Security card, if they have them, to travel within the region. Yes? It has the Dominica flag on it, so it tells that you are a Dominican. Their nationality can be detected from that. It has biodata on the person that they can see. And when they land on the other side, they ask them, how valid is this card? Well, how valid? Are you current? Is it current? So we've had to include an expiry with it. So it has a 5-year validity, and it will be renewable after the 5th year. But if you haven't been paying contributions, you're not current. You're not current. So they want to know if it's a valid card because they want to know whether you are current with your status at this institution. So people need to continue to make their contribution payments because Ultimately, that's what's going to give them access to the benefit, not just to have a card to flash around. I have an ID. And Mr. Lloyd says it's not an ID card. It's not an ID. Other places recognize it or accept it as a valid form of ID. But it's not an ID that you can just come and access and request or even pay for.
Yeah, because you're a resident.
Yeah.
So.
It is a card that you will have if you are a registered member.
Yeah.
And because you are not a registered member, because you've never been working, you will not have a card until you start working and paying contributions. So the bank may have its requirement that they need a social security card, but every person will not have a social security card. And everybody needs to understand that. They cannot just tell them go to social security and get a card. Because if you're not paying, first of all, you have to register for you to get a card, and you only register when you are working. Because if you're not working, you cannot pay contributions. And we exist for you to register, pay contributions, and importantly, for you to derive benefits after having paid those contributions.
Yeah.
And I had a person I interface with regularly in my community. His card expired, he told me, and he's approaching 65, and I said to him, well, as you're approaching the age, we need to make sure your contributions are up to date. Come and pay whatever. He wanted to renew the card, but since he registered how many months ago, he never paid a single contribution. But yet he have a card flashing around. At the end, what is the point? It doesn't make sense. If you had paid some contributions, and Mark, even if they didn't qualify for a pension, they could qualify for a lump sum, a lump sum, because they would get something back, but would have made no contributions whatsoever. And you have a card flashing around.
Flash it.
And just as Mr. Etienne said that, Miguel, too, I just want to encourage the self-employed persons who are out there. You may have a social security card flashing around. You may have a social security card because you registered many years ago. You probably made one or two or a few contributions. Now is the opportune time for you to come into social security and renew your status with social security, to resume making those contributions. So if something happens to you tomorrow, you can have access to benefits and your dependents can have access to benefit, because you know you're self-employed, Miguel. If you cannot work as a self-employed person, you cannot earn money. And so if you are sick, what happens when you're sick as a self-employed person? You cannot earn, you cannot pay your bills, you have to depend on somebody else. But if you make those contributions to Social Security, when you are sick, we can replace up to 60% of those earnings for you. That will assist you with living a comfortable life, paying your bills, taking care of your family, and so on. And when you're not there tomorrow, your family will have access to benefits, your dependents that you leave behind.
And Miguel, sometimes they tell you, I'm not paying myself, I'm not able to pay myself. That may be true. Because we're not asking you to pay your earnings into Social Security. We're asking you to pay a percentage of an earning into Social Security. I like to tell some people, imagine you're operating a business for years. You've never been able to pay yourself, but you're paying for operating the business, you're paying your workers, and you're paying Social Security for your workers. But you register as a self-employed, and you pay contributions as if you were making a certain salary. Let's say of $1,000. Now, you never seen that in your life. You never gotten $1,000 from the operation of the business. And you're sick for a whole month. And you've been paying your contributions as if you were making $1,000. For the month you're sick, you would get $600 from Social Security. $600 that you never get from your own business. But because you're paying as if you were making $1,000, you get benefit. So you will not necessarily have to be paying yourself. And everybody looking for excuses. But the time is going to come when they will not be able to operate their business, ply their trade, and they will have need for money. I find, and some people know in Dominica, they figure it does make sense paying, because if they don't pay, they will get something from the government at the end of the day. The government has a provision in place now that they pay a non-contributory pension to persons who haven't got access to an income. But this is something that is there now. It doesn't mean it wasn't always there. It is there now. It doesn't mean it always be there.
Right.
But if you pay your Social Security, and maybe the government should probably not do this because it might be discouraging people who can't pay not to pay. But if they do that, they might be setting themselves short, because while it might be a reality now, down the road when you become pensionable, it may not be there anymore. But if you pay your contributions, no government, no director, no board, nobody at Social Security can say you're not getting benefit, because you would have earned it as a matter of right. So we've been the penny wise pound foolish. Yeah. We're avoiding certain things, and then we figure somebody will take care of us. But nobody owes you anything. You have a responsibility to safeguard yourself and your future and that of your family. So do what you have to do, so that tomorrow you'll be able to live independently. It may be small, and if it is small, again, the self-employed people determine how much they can get. Yep. They can, manipulate they can pretty much, and some of them actually do, they try to come and up their income just before they retire. Because they understand it, they approaching the retirement age and how the benefits calculated on the last earnings, the highest earnings within the last few years of contributions. But that is not the intention. You try to contribute on earnings that closely reflect what you're actually making so that your benefit will make sense to you, because the benefit you will receive will be a percentage of the earnings that you are accustomed of living on. But when you're living on 10,000 salary and you pay contribution on $1,000, the benefit will be relative to 1,000 and not relative to what you are accustomed of living on. It will not make sense to you. So as much as possible, try to pay contributions on earnings that are closely approximate what you're actually making. For voluntary contributors as well, when they if they had contributions in the system before, we try to encourage them to at least start where they were at the last time they contributed, because the pensions are calculated on the best 10 earnings of the last 15 years that they contribute prior to becoming pensionable.
Okay.
So people can pretty much determine how much their benefits, again, based on the earnings on which they pay contributions.
Definitely the onus is on us as a people. I feel I just want to accommodate one more call. Let's just accommodate one more call, though we're at the end of the program. Hello, good morning.
Yes, hi, Miguel, good morning.
Yes, hi. Good morning.
My question is crisp and informative. Mr. Etienne and your other guest, good morning.
Mrs. Lloyd, yes.
Good morning.
Good morning, caller.
Yes, I'm part of the system, right? So I know the middle of what's going on. But I just want to correct, have you clarify what something just said. You said there's a non-contributory pension that the government is involved in for people, who have not contributed to the system. That is not correct.
No. I didn't say for people who didn't
Mr.
contribute to the system. I was saying for people who are without an income.
Yeah.
From any source, whatever. Some of them are people who did not contribute to the system, to Social Security, but it doesn't mean everybody.
Right. So I think we've clarified that. Thank you, caller.
Yes.
Thank you again, Mr. Etienne, Mrs. Lloyd, for your continued education and information and enlightenment. Again, the responsibility lies within each and every one of us to do the right thing.
Indeed.
That's
We
right,
do
Miguel.
appreciate you. Again, people can just give you a call, visit the office
Yes, correct.
in town.
And follow us on social media as well. Thank
Follow
you.
you guys on social media. Thank you, and we will see you again some other time.
Thank you,
Thank
Doc.
you, Miguel.
Have a
Yes.
good rest of the day and a
Thank
good
you.
weekend. Thank
Have
you.
a good one. Thank you. And that's